I want to let you know, sort of the book is divided very roughly into two different sections. The first part is we are just traveling around Taiwan, having a wonderful time and having all sorts of adventures. We pretty much go to every part of Taiwan. We didn't go to Penghu, but we even have a little chapter for Pingdong that we're embarrassed about because we wanted to do more about Pingdong, but we ran out of time. So we have a train ride that goes through Pingdong, and it's this is Pingdong. But then later we felt bad about that, so she'll tell you about that. But the second part of the book, we basically are sort of in Tainan, and I got an email from a friend of mine. It's the apartment upstairs is now available. You've already looked at it, and you really like it. The landlord wants to know if you want to move in right before Lunar New Year. And I'm yeah, let's do that. So the second part of the book, by and large, takes place. We travel around a lot in Taiwan, but part of it is centered in what became the other character in the book, which is a place called Huayuan Xinchang, or New Garden City, where we lived for, it was 7 months we lived there. We wrote the book there, and it was kind of an experience. I had lived in New Garden City when I was younger and more physically fit. And I lived there when I was literally 31 years old. I used to rollerblade up the mountain halfway to Ulai and then rollerblade down. And for some reason at the age of 31, I was very comfortable with the idea that if I wanted to go shopping, I had to basically go all the way to a supermarket and come back up. At the age of 48, which is I guess what I was when I went back there, I was not in that same mindset, and thus living in New Garden City was a challenge, and that turned out many funny parts of the book. We don't live there anymore now. We live in Mujia with lots of restaurants and 7-Elevens around us. But
oh yeah,
it was he told us about it. He's
oh, he totally did.
There are many he was the voice of reason in the book. But this is a chapter called Now We Have a Chicken.
This chicken.
Yes. You'll read it says Roy, 2016 to question mark. You don't know. Now we have a chicken. We left the house just before dusk to find a chicken in the road. Our immediate question did not concern its motives, but why it had been tied up there. With a rope around one leg and another tangled around a bush, the bird was blissfully unaware of the perils it faced, being a mere block away from Dog Lane. That was the block that we lived on. We called it Dog Lane because there were a lot of dogs that lived on the street and roamed around all the time. Not a good place to keep a chicken. The chicken was gentle and allowed me to lift it without so much as a flutter or peck. A neighbor walked by with her dog, which was off leash but kept its distance. "Do you recognize this chicken?" I asked, holding it aloft so as not to tempt the dog. She said she did not. "Perhaps it is Teacher Huang's down the road. He keeps chickens." "Maybe," she agreed. "It isn't like Teacher Huang to tie a chicken up in the road," I said. The woman with the dog didn't know Teacher Huang well enough to opine. She walked on. I'd been promising to take Taiwanese language lessons with Teacher Huang for several months, but had yet to make good on the promise. I carried the chicken to his house, and Stephanie rapped on the door. "Ulang Dibo!" I yelled. Taiwanese for "is anyone home?" I think. But Teacher Huang hadn't come home yet. Leaving the chicken in his yard seemed a bad idea for a number of reasons. "Well," Stephanie said after a moment, I was still holding the chicken, "I think we should call him Roy." "It's a good enough name for a chicken," Stephanie agreed, "but it doesn't answer the question of what we're going to do with him." New Garden City has many free-roaming dogs. It seemed likely that if we left Roy outside for any length of time, even untied, he'd be killed. Edward and Abby have a fairly large and overgrown patch of jungle for a yard with a low fence to keep their two dogs, Kanye and Weiwei, from getting loose for some of the time. We knew their dogs were inside, as we put them in ourselves earlier. We put Roy on a patch of ground in their yard and went about our evening. It seemed the best option. We got back from the Family Mart at the top of the hill half an hour later to find Roy perched on the wire fence, seeming to be fast asleep. It was night by then, and chickens prefer to sleep perched, so this was not unusual. On the ground, a few feet away, sat a large toad. Stephanie sat down delicately between the two and sighed, and I sensed she was conflicted. She'd taken a shine to Roy, and no doubt felt guilty about the chicken stew we'd had for lunch. And would probably continue to have for supper. I considered licking the toad's back for spiritual guidance. Let's leave them outside for a while. They seem to have formed an alliance. Stephanie and I went inside. When Edward and Abby returned, we asked their advice on the matter. We are still not gardeners, and they were, so no doubt they would offer new insight. We ate supper. By silent agreement, we decided on nachos. Afterwards, I posted Roy's photo on the New Garden City secondhand line group with the Chinese characters for, "Recognize this chicken? Contact me." A woman called Momi wrote back cryptically, "That could belong to 89. "Is that the address of a farmer?" I replied. "No, his nickname. I will pass on the message." After a while, Edward and Abby returned. After I helped them move gardening supplies into their yard, they accompanied me to the fence. Roy and Mr. Skippers, his toad buddy, hadn't moved. "His name is Roy," I said. "Roy is a hen," Abby said. I hadn't realized this. "How can you tell?" Edward can tell. He used to raise chickens. Ed, who'd been silent until now, asked if Roy had any visible injuries when I found her. When I said she hadn't, he lifted her gently from her perch and blew air on her nether regions. "She's a hen," he proclaimed, and handed her to me, adding, "and a young one at that." Abby felt it possible that the chicken had escaped from the man nicknamed 89, but it was hardly a given as he lived on the opposite side of the village. Regardless, I now felt as if I knew Roy too well to let her spend the night outdoors. Mr. Skippers had hopped away, which meant that she would be all alone in a strange neighborhood. "Bring her onto the balcony." Bringing her onto our balcony of our apartment, I patted a box with a burlap sack and some rice husks Abby had provided, while Stephanie asked Google pertinent questions like, "Do chickens eat rice?" Yes. And "Do chickens eat chia seed?" Also yes. We put some of both in a small Tupperware next to Roy's box and closed the balcony door. Stephanie kept an eye on Roy while I walked to Teacher Huang's house. Finding him home, I explained our situation. Teacher Huang told me that his flock was not missing a chicken. "Did you contact 89? Teacher Huang asked. "He also keeps chickens." 89 has been notified, I replied. "If it does not belong to him, I will take her," he said, adding in Taiwanese, "When are you going to start your Taiwanese lessons?" "When the book is done," I said. I returned home and told Stephanie that it appeared that we had temporary custody of a chicken. "I thought we had agreed no pets while in Taiwan," she answered, to which I replied, "We can always eat her if she gives us any trouble." Roy slept that night perched on the rim of her box on our balcony, which was by and large an excellent house, and she was by and large an excellent house guest. Any noise she might have made in the morning was drowned out by the neighborhood dogs. We woke, and Roy jumped off her box when she heard the screen door slide open and began pecking the empty container, staring up at me expectantly. I refilled the box, finished my coffee, and checked my phone for messages from the mysterious 89, but there were none. "Now we have a chicken," noted Stephanie. We had to go out for the day, so we arranged for Roy to stay in Edward and Abby's yard, where she could hunt for insects and fertilize their garden. In permaculture terms, this is known as stacking functions and is good. Edward agreed not to let the dogs in the yard that day, as they would almost certainly murder Roy. In permaculture terms, this is known as "the dogs have killed the chicken" and is considered neutral at best. We walked the streets of Taipei that afternoon, contemplating the strange set of circumstances that had led us both to simultaneously being residents of Asia's 15th largest metropolis and also harboring a fugitive chicken. Stephanie had warmed up to Roy, and so had I. We contemplated the possibility of not taking Teacher Huang up on his offer. Our balcony was large, Roy was young enough to provide eggs for many years to come. But our dreams of animal husbandry were cut short by a message on my mobile phone. "Hello, I am owner of chicken. Thank you for caring. Can I take her back?" It was from 89. He'd gotten our message through the Garden City grapevine. I texted him our address and let him know that Roy would be in Edward and Abby's garden. We returned home that night to an apartment that felt emptier than it had when we left it. The only trace that Roy had ever been there was the cardboard box, littered with rice husks and chicken shit. To Abby. Thanks, Roy.
They've been promoting it.
It's the best music. I find like always have good songs. This goes to April.
Always correcting my attempts at Chinese. Have my mini Chinese lessons.
Grab that. I'm gonna grab some more books. We're running out. Hold on.
Nice to meet you.